Imagine being told to sit in the back where you belong, while wearing the uniform of a U.S. soldier. What happens next will shock you, and it's a story you need to hear. Stay tuned, and if you want to see more stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Sit in the back where you belong. Those were the words that left an entire cabin in stunned silence. It was supposed to be an ordinary flight from Dallas to Atlanta, the kind that people forget the moment they land. But for Staff Sergeant Marcus Bailey, a Black American soldier returning home after a grueling 14-month deployment overseas, it became a moment that would not only test his patience and dignity, but also expose a deep-rooted problem that still lingers in the skies. And, in society, Marcus, dressed proudly in his pressed army fatigues, carried with him the quiet exhaustion of someone who had seen too much and missed too many milestones back home. Boarding the flight early thanks to his military status, he gave a polite nod to the airline staff, greeted fellow passengers with the humility of a man who had never let his uniform make him feel above anyone else, and made his way to seat 4B, located in the premium section. He had paid for the upgrade himself, not because he expected special treatment, but because after months of sleeping in bunkers and traveling in military cargo planes, he simply wanted a bit of comfort on his way back to his family. As he settled in, a flight attendant approached him with a look that carried neither welcome nor warmth. Her name tag read, C. Jenkins. She glanced at him, then down at the row number, and without so much as a hello, her lips curled into a sneer as she snapped, "This seat isn't for you. You people know where you should be." Marcus, initially taken aback, tried to keep calm. He smiled, unsure if he'd misheard, and responded, "Ma'am, this is 4B. That's what's on my boarding pass." But she didn't check. She didn't even ask to see his ticket. She just rolled her eyes and said louder this time, "This is for premium passengers. Take your seat in the back." The tone wasn't just condescending. It was humiliating. Passengers nearby started shifting in their seats, some frowning, others watching in quiet discomfort. A woman seated in 4A leaned over and said, "He's in the right seat, I saw his boarding pass." But Jenkins wasn't interested in facts. She muttered something under her breath, something that sounded a lot like always trying to get something for free, and walked off before Marcus could respond. For a moment he sat frozen, stunned by the disrespect. He had worn his uniform on purpose, not for praise, but as a symbol of service and pride. To be told, publicly and with no hesitation, that he didn't belong in a particular seat because of how he looked, it brought back memories of the stories his grandfather told him about segregation in the 1960s. But this was 2025. And yet, here it was again. Another flight attendant soon came over, summoned by another concerned passenger. This one, the lead flight attendant, was more professional. She apologized immediately after checking Marcus's boarding pass and confirmed he was exactly where he was supposed to be. She offered him a complimentary drink and asked if he'd like to file a complaint. But Marcus wasn't thinking about drinks or complaints. He was thinking about how many times this kind of thing happens quietly, without a phone camera, without a crowd. Unfortunately for Jenkins, several people were recording. One of those people was a middle school teacher named Rachel, who uploaded the clip with the caption, "This is how we treat our soldiers? Absolutely disgraceful." Within hours, the video had spread across social media. It was reposted, retweeted, stitched into TikToks, and dissected on YouTube. Hashtags like "Honor Marcus," "Racism in the Air," and "He Deserves Better" trended within a day. Thousands of users shared their own stories. Black travelers, veterans, people who'd faced quiet discrimination in high places. The video captured more than just an argument over a seat. It captured the weary face of a man who had risked his life overseas, only to be treated like a second-class citizen back home. Marcus himself didn't post anything for a while. He stayed quiet, overwhelmed by the attention and still trying to process the encounter. But when he finally did speak, his words were powerful and composed. "I've worn this uniform for most of my adult life. I've never asked for special treatment, just equal treatment. I paid for my seat. I followed the rules. I didn't expect to be told, in front of a full plane, that I don't belong." The airline, under pressure from media outlets and public outcry, launched an investigation and issued a formal apology to Marcus. Jenkins, the flight attendant, was placed on leave pending the results. The company promised to implement new training focused on racial sensitivity and bias awareness. But for many people, the apology wasn't enough. Why does it always take a viral video for people to care? One commenter asked. Another wrote, imagine how many people have been treated like Marcus without anyone filming. For Marcus, the real issue wasn't just that it happened to him, it's that it could have happened to anyone. He later shared that during his deployment, he helped deliver food and medical supplies to disaster zones. He'd helped rebuild schools and even saved a fellow soldier's life during a surprise attack. Yet none of that had mattered when a flight attendant looked at his skin color and uniform and decided he didn't belong. The story took on a life of its own, making it to national news outlets and sparking panel discussions on major networks. Veterans groups reached out to him, offering support and organizing petitions demanding broader airline reforms. Civil rights advocates cited the incident as a reminder of the quiet racism that still lurks in places where we least expect it, in boardrooms, schools, and yes, even on planes. Eventually, Marcus was invited to speak at several public events. At one, he said something that stuck with millions of viewers. I didn't choose to be a symbol. But if this moment can open people's eyes, if it can make just one person think twice before judging someone by their uniform or their skin, then maybe something good can come out of it. The video that had once captured his humiliation now served as a rallying cry, a lesson, and a mirror held up to a nation that still has work to do. And as for Marcus, he's still flying, still serving, not because he expects anything in return, but because that's who he is. A soldier, a man of dignity, and above all a reminder that respect is not a privilege, it's a right. Just minutes after Marcus sat down, still adjusting his backpack beneath the seat in front of him, a flight attendant walked briskly down the aisle with a clipboard in hand and a furrowed brow. Her name tag read, C. Jenkins. From the moment her eyes landed on Marcus, her demeanor shifted. Her expression tightened, her shoulders stiffened. Without a hello, without asking for a boarding pass, and without even looking down at the ticket clutched in his hand, she scowled and said coldly, "This seat isn't for you. You people know where you should be." The words hit like a slap in the face. Marcus blinked, stunned for a second. Was this really happening? Dressed in full military uniform, he had spent the last 14 months deployed overseas, leading missions, training local forces, and surviving conditions that would break many men. Now he was being told, on U.S. soil and in front of dozens of strangers, that he didn't belong, based purely on appearance. He gathered himself quickly, trying to stay composed. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice low and respectful, "this is my assigned seat. I'm in 4B. But Jenkins didn't even flinch. She didn't look at the boarding pass. She didn't glance at the seat numbers on the overhead bin. Instead, she gave a tight, dismissive smile and said sharply, "This row is for premium passengers. You can take your seat in the back, where coach begins." The tone she used made it clear. This wasn't a matter of confusion. This was a judgment, a decision made the moment she saw his face, his skin color, and maybe even the way he carried himself. The plane suddenly seemed to shrink as silence spread through the cabin. Conversations stopped, phones lowered, eyebrows raised, people began to tune in. A woman sitting in 4A, middle-aged and sharp-eyed, leaned over and said clearly, "He's not wrong. That's what his ticket says." She looked directly at Jenkins, challenging her with the kind of quiet authority that demanded attention. But the flight attendant wasn't done. She let out a loud, exaggerated sigh as if she were the victim in the situation, as if this simple act of confirming a seat was a personal burden. Then she rolled her eyes and muttered just loud enough for several passengers to hear, "Always trying to get something for nothing." It wasn't just rude, it was venomous. It was loaded with implication, dripping with disrespect. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, not from shame, but from the sting of being reduced to a stereotype. He had fought through gunfire, led men in hostile territories, missed his daughter's birthday 3 years in a row, and now, after all of that, He was being told to move to the back, like it was 1955, not 2025. Still, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. Instead, with the same calm presence that made him a respected leader in uniform, he looked the woman square in the eye and said, "I'd like to speak to the head flight attendant." That request, simple and well within his rights, seemed to flip a switch. Jenkins narrowed her eyes, let out another dramatic breath, and stalked off without a word. But the damage had been done. The mood of the cabin had shifted. What should have been a smooth takeoff was now heavy with tension and disbelief. Passengers were whispering. A few pulled out their phones, not obviously, but enough to capture what was happening. One young man in row 5 turned on his camera app and aimed it discreetly toward Marcus's row, catching snippets of the confrontation. Another woman across the aisle typed furiously on her phone, documenting the interaction in real time on social media. Marcus sat still, hands folded, trying to maintain his composure as his heart pounded. He wasn't just angry. He was hurt. He thought of his parents, who had marched for civil rights. He thought of his fellow soldiers, black and white, who had stood beside him in war zones without caring about skin color. And now here he was, treated like a thief, like a liar, simply because someone refused to believe a black man belonged in a premium seat. A few minutes later, the lead flight attendant arrived, a tall woman with a calm presence and a professional tone. She approached Marcus with an apologetic smile and asked for his boarding pass. He handed it to her without hesitation. She looked at it, checked the seat number, and nodded. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be, Sergeant," she said. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding." Marcus nodded back, tight-lipped. "Thank you," he replied. The other passengers watched closely. Some smiled at him in solidarity. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps realizing they had witnessed something far more serious than a seating mix-up. As the lead attendant offered Marcus a complimentary beverage and said she'd handle it, Jenkins disappeared into the back of the plane. But her actions had already been recorded, remembered, and soon they would be seen by millions. Because one of those passengers had already uploaded the clip online with a caption that would ignite the internet. "This is how we treat our soldiers? Absolutely disgusting. Racism in the air. Chaka honor our heroes." And by the time the plane landed in Atlanta, Marcus's story was already going viral. Unbeknownst to Jenkins, several passengers had quietly hit record on their phones, capturing the tension and injustice unfolding just rows ahead. Among them was Rachel Mendoza, a young middle school teacher from Austin, flying home after a weekend teachers' conference. Seated just behind Marcus, she had watched the entire incident with rising disbelief, her fingers trembling slightly as she filmed. She wasn't trying to chase clout or stir drama. She just knew, deep in her gut, that what was happening needed to be seen. Her video showed Jenkins towering over Marcus with crossed arms and thinly veiled contempt, refusing to so much as glance at the boarding pass he politely held up. It caught the clipped tone in her voice, the way she turned her back on him as though dismissing a child, and the cold, sharp comment under her breath as she walked away. Always trying to get something for nothing. But most damning, and most powerful, was what came next. The camera still rolling caught Marcus rising slightly from his seat, steady but visibly shaken, and saying in a voice clear enough to pierce through the quiet cabin, "I fought for this country. I shouldn't have to fight for my seat." His words, simple and undeniable, hung in the air like a thunderclap. It was the kind of moment that demanded silence, not because no one cared, but because everyone did, and no one quite knew how to respond. Seconds later, another passenger, a businessman seated in row 3, tapped the call button and requested the head flight attendant. She arrived within minutes, professional and composed, and handled the situation with the dignity that had been absent just moments before. After a brief and respectful exchange, she reviewed Marcus's boarding pass, glanced at the seat number, and without hesitation confirmed, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be, Sergeant." That was it. No drama, no confusion. Just facts. Jenkins, watching from the galley, offered nothing. No apology, no acknowledgement, not even eye contact. She simply turned and walked away, her heels clicking coldly on the aisle floor. Rachel, now more outraged than stunned, knew she had to share what she had captured, not just because it had happened, but because it happened far too often to people who didn't wear uniforms, who didn't have the presence of mind to remain calm, or who didn't get filmed. When the plane touched down in Atlanta and passengers began deboarding, she found a quiet corner in the terminal, sat on a bench, and posted the video with a caption that read, "This is how we treat our heroes? Staff Sergeant Bailey was humiliated on our flight for simply sitting in the seat he paid for. I hope this goes viral, because silence helps no one." She added hashtags like, "Honor our heroes," "Racism," "In the air," and "Justice for Marcus." Within an hour, the video had already garnered thousands of views. By the next morning, it had been shared by major influencers, veterans organizations, and even a few celebrities. Comments flooded in, many offering support, others sharing similar experiences, and a growing number demanding accountability from the airline. Marcus himself stayed quiet in those first hours. He had no idea what Rachel had posted until his younger brother texted him, "You're trending. What happened?" At first, Marcus wasn't sure whether to be grateful or overwhelmed. He had just wanted to get home, hug his daughter, and sleep in his own bed. But now, he was being pulled into something much bigger. His face was everywhere. News anchors debated the video. Talk shows picked apart every moment. The airline released a brief statement saying they were looking into the matter, but the public demanded more. People weren't just angry about what Jenkins had said. They were angry because it was part of a pattern of microaggressions, subtle racism, and the casual disrespect shown to people who often don't have the platform to respond. Veterans groups reached out to Marcus, offering support and platforms to speak if he chose. Civil rights leaders reposted the video, saying it highlighted exactly how systemic racism manifests in everyday places, in coffee shops, retail stores, and now, at 30,000 feet. The tipping point came when a well-known retired general tweeted, "If a decorated staff sergeant in uniform can be treated like this in public, we need to ask, what's happening to the ones who don't have cameras rolling?" That tweet alone sparked a new wave of awareness, and through it all, Marcus remained measured. He released a short video 2 days later, filmed from his front porch, wearing a plain t-shirt and speaking directly to the camera. "I didn't ask for any of this," he began. "I just wanted to fly home and see my family. But if this video and what happened to me helps someone else feel seen, then maybe it's worth it. I served my country with honor. All I ask is that I'm treated with the same." His voice didn't crack. He didn't shout. He simply told the truth, and that truth resonated. The video racked up millions of views in a matter of hours. The airline, now under intense pressure, issued a formal apology to Marcus and placed Jenkins on administrative leave pending a full investigation. They also announced a review of their staff conduct training, particularly around racial bias and customer service standards. But for many, the apology wasn't enough. Online petitions called for mandatory anti-discrimination training for all airline staff. Some urged passengers to boycott the airline until serious reforms were made. News outlets began interviewing other passengers from the flight, many of whom echoed what Rachel had documented. Marcus had remained calm and respectful throughout. It was Jenkins who had created conflict where none existed. As for Rachel, she was thrust into the public eye as well, hailed as a bystander who did the right thing. She later told a news reporter, "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to make sure the world saw what he went through. Because that kind of silence, that quiet injustice, it's exactly why these things keep happening." And, in the days that followed, the conversation grew beyond just Marcus. People. By the next morning, the video had exploded across the internet, racking up over 4 million views on multiple platforms. Social media was ablaze. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all flooded with hashtags like #Justice for Marcus, Just Racism, In the Skies, and #Seek Honor Our Heroes. People from all walks of life, veterans, teachers, activists, even celebrities were sharing the clip, adding their own voices to the growing outrage. "This is America in 2025, one tweet read. A black soldier fights overseas and gets told to sit in the back when he comes home. Another user posted, "He wore the uniform for us. The least we can do is fight for him now." It wasn't just online noise. News networks picked up the story, airing the video on morning shows and primetime reports. Journalists tracked down Marcus and requested interviews. At first hesitant, Marcus eventually agreed, not because he wanted the attention, but because he felt a responsibility. On Good Morning America, he appeared in a simple blue shirt, sitting beside his teenage daughter. He didn't point fingers or raise his voice. He simply said, "This wasn't the first time I've experienced racism, but it was definitely the most public and the most humiliating. I was in uniform. I was respectful. I did everything right, and I was still treated like I didn't belong." His quiet strength hit home with millions. The interviewer, visibly emotional, thanked him not just for his service, but for his composure. Marcus replied, "Dignity isn't just for the battlefield. It's for everyday life, and we all deserve to be treated with dignity, uniform or not." Meanwhile, the airline was scrambling. Their customer service lines were flooded with complaints. Major media outlets demanded a response. Within 24 hours of the video going viral, the company released an initial statement calling the behavior unacceptable and assuring the public that a full internal investigation was underway. But the public wasn't satisfied. "Investigate what?" One viral comment read. "We all saw the video." Under intense pressure and scrutiny, the airline released a follow-up statement 3 days later. It confirmed what the public had already demanded. The flight attendant had been placed on administrative leave. A formal apology was issued to Marcus Bailey, both privately and publicly. The company also pledged to implement mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all staff across its national and international flights. "We are committed to ensuring every passenger is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve," the statement read. Some applauded the swift action. They praised the airline for taking responsibility and promising reform. But others weren't impressed. "Why did it take a viral video for the airline to care?" one headline asked. "What happens to passengers when no one is filming?" Editorials in major newspapers raised deeper questions about institutional accountability and unconscious bias. Civil rights groups demanded further commitments, not just training, but systemic policy changes, transparent reporting, and third-party oversight. Activists called for the airline to release diversity statistics and hire equity officers to oversee future training and complaint handling. Marcus, for his part, remained centered. He didn't call for anyone to be fired, and he didn't seek compensation. When asked what he wanted, he said, "I want real change. I want my daughter to grow up in a country where dignity isn't earned by a uniform or a title or a zip code. I want her to grow up in a place where it's just given, because it should be." His words struck a chord. Within days, schools began using his story in classroom discussions about race, bias, and respect. College campuses hosted panels. Veterans groups honored Marcus at a public event in Atlanta, presenting him with a Medal of Community Courage, praising him not just for his military service, but for the calm leadership he showed in the face of prejudice. And while the story dominated headlines for a week, its impact went further. Rachel, the teacher who filmed the incident, became an advocate for bystander awareness, launching a grassroots campaign called Record and Respond, urging others to speak out and intervene when witnessing injustice. She told reporters, "I didn't do anything special. I just pointed my camera at the truth. But sometimes, the truth needs help being seen." Airlines across the industry began quietly, reviewing their own training policies, some even reaching out to Marcus privately to ask for input. A few initiated new passenger dignity policies, encouraging staff to check biases and treat every boarding pass with the same respect, no matter the passenger's appearance. In time, the noise of the internet moved on, as it always does. The hashtags trended a little less. New stories took over the headlines, but the legacy of that moment, of one soldier standing his ground, of one teacher raising her phone, and of millions rallying around a call for basic human decency, remained. Marcus returned to his quiet life, back to coaching his daughters, soccer games, and volunteering with fellow veterans. He never saw himself as a symbol, but in the eyes of many, he had become just that, not because of a uniform, but because of his unwavering belief in what every person, soldier or not, deserves: to be seen, to be heard, and to be treated with respect. For Marcus Bailey, this was never about going viral or collecting praise. It was about something far deeper: dignity. From the moment he was told to sit in the back where you belong, something shifted inside him. Not out of anger or pride, but out of a lifetime's worth of understanding what it means to be quietly disrespected, overlooked, or told to shrink himself to make others comfortable. As the media storm swirled and his name trended across platforms, Marcus kept his focus, grounded. He didn't jump at every interview request or clap back at critics online. He knew the world would move on eventually, but he also knew that what happened to him had touched a nerve that had long needed exposing. In a follow-up interview with a national news anchor, he sat with his hands folded, his voice calm and resolute. "It's not just about me," he said. "It's about the little black boy watching this, wondering if he'll be treated the same way when he grows up. It's about the veterans who don't have cameras on them when they're mistreated. If speaking up now helps someone else get treated better later, then I'll take whatever heat comes with it." That statement resonated with people everywhere. In the weeks that followed, Marcus received an outpouring of support. Thousands of messages from fellow veterans, exhausted airline passengers, parents, teachers, clergy, activists, and ordinary people who simply said, "Thank you." Black families in particular shared how deeply his story affected them. Some said their sons asked questions they didn't yet know how to answer. Others said the moment sparked powerful conversations at dinner tables and in classrooms. Many shared their own moments of silent humiliation when they had been followed in a store, ignored in a restaurant, or told with a fake smile that they were mistaken about where they belonged. And again they wrote to Marcus not just to express outrage, but to express gratitude, because in that moment on the plane, he had remained calm. He had refused to be provoked. He had responded with strength, not spite, and for so many watching, especially young people of color, that mattered. It showed that dignity could be louder than hate, and truth could be stronger than prejudice. Veterans organizations continued to rally behind Marcus, some inviting him to speak at gatherings and events, where he emphasized unity, awareness, and training, not revenge. Civil rights groups highlighted his story as part of a broader campaign for equity in public spaces. And quietly, behind the scenes, airline executives and hospitality leaders began reevaluating their training programs and complaint protocols, realizing that the cost of inaction could no longer be written off. Meanwhile, Marcus stayed close to home, spending more time with his daughter, walking his dog through the same neighborhoods he had grown up in, and checking in on fellow soldiers transitioning back to civilian life. Fame, if you could call it, that didn't change him. It only deepened his sense of purpose. When asked by a local high school senior for advice during a community event, Marcus simply said, "Stand tall. Even when they try to make you small, your truth is enough. Your presence is enough." His story became more than just a viral clip or headline. It became a symbol of quiet courage, of grace under pressure, and of what it looks like when someone refuses to be pushed back, not with fists or fury, but with calm certainty. He didn't shout. He didn't demand. He stood. And because he stood, others saw. Others stood too. Not all stories that go viral create lasting change, but some do. Some shift hearts, sharpen awareness, and plant seeds of justice. Marcus's story was one of them, not just because of what happened, but because of how he chose to respond. In a world where noise often drowns out meaning, his voice was clear. It reminded people that everyone, regardless of race, rank, or role, deserves respect. That silence is complicity, and that sometimes it only takes one person in one seat to stand up for something bigger than themselves. Thank you so much for watching. Stories like these remind us of the power of standing up for what's right no matter the cost. If this story inspired you, Hit that subscribe button and make sure you turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful moment like this. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay strong, stay respectful, and always stand up for what's right.